Hey guys, tonight we dive into the strangely soothing world of Viking winters, not the battles, not the ships, but the long, cold, damp months where most of the time nothing really happened. You're not raiding a monastery tonight, trying to keep your socks dry. Picture this. The fjord is frozen over. Your sheep look annoyed. And your toes, despite being layered in roughly 3 pairs of wool stockings, are still debating whether to fall off. The world outside your longhouse is quiet, white, and deceptively pretty. There's a faint crackle from the hearth, the sour-sweet scent of last week's boiled fish still clinging to the air. And someone's goat is breathing loudly inside, because that's where livestock live in the winter. With you, cozy, until you realize that snowdrift is covering your firewood pile. Not with a grand storm, but with a slow, silent cover that makes everything muffled and just a little harder to deal with. Cows, sheep, a couple of shaggy ponies, they don't look pleased. You're not sure they ever do. Someone forgot to stoke it, probably your younger cousin. Claims he has dreams of being a poet and therefore doesn't lift firewood. The smoke hole overhead isn't doing its job, and the entire room smells like singed moss and burnt seal fat. Good morning. But especially not in the early dark, when the hay is damp and the air is somewhere between barnyard, earthy, and fermented onions. This takes 20 minutes, 3 sneezes, and a loud snap that makes the goat in the corner panic dramatically. Refill troughs with water, break the ice with a stick you've named Thor Splinter, and try not to slip on anything that used to be grass. There's a leak in the roof again, which means you'll need to patch it with moss in silent rage. Everything becomes about the next meal, the next fire, the next dry pair of socks, if such a thing exists. The noise of summer axes, market chatter, drunken wedding songs is gone. Now there's just the sound of wind through wood, crackling fire, and the occasional sheep-related disaster. The firewood is running low, and you need to haul more from the stack near the river, which is now under 3 feet of snow. You sigh loudly enough that your grandmother tells you not to waste breath. It's bad luck in winter. It's mostly a series of uneven frozen puddles, a collapsed fence corner, and the suspicious hole where you think a fox has been watching you. But what is certain is this. Viking winters were shared. With kin, with cattle, with constant noise. You say yes, not out of kindness, but because you secretly want to snoop on what they're storing. Suspect they have actual dried apples. Scandalous. The barn creaks as you open the heavy wooden door. Your face is instantly slapped with a cloud of warm, humid animal breath. It's going to be a long, cold season. But at least you've got your goats. A goat sneezes on you. You say nothing. You've accepted your fate. Everyone sleeps along the walls on raised wooden platforms covered in straw, furs, and arguments. The central hearth is the heart of it all. It gives light, warmth, and dinner, or burns your eyebrows off if you're not careful. He's been awake since before dawn. You don't ask why. It's not polite to question the ways of those who stir porridge with such intensity. You wake up one morning and realize your boots hand-stitched, fur-lined. Questionably waterproof are, already no match for the morning slush. Again, you wake up to a soft kind of darkness, the kind that never really lifts in December. Not in a cinematic flurry, but in a steady, irritating way that makes you want to shake your fist at the sky and shout, I get it. It's winter. But you don't, because your other cousin tried that once and got a mouthful of snow and a lecture about respecting the gods. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in from somewhere cold, somewhere hot, or somewhere in between, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always comforting to know where fellow sleepy historians are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first snow always comes earlier than you want it to. You trudge out into the yard. Well, yard might be generous. Inside the barn, the livestock are crowded tightly together. Back in the longhouse, the fire's barely alive. You nudge a half-frozen log onto the coals and coax it into cooperation. The longhouse isn't spacious. It's a big, shared hall made of timber and turf, with low ceilings and high expectations of tolerance. Historians still argue whether Viking families brought their animals inside full-time or just during storms. The truth is likely a mix. Your neighbor is already up, muttering over a wooden bowl of porridge so thick it defies physics. The snow outside is still falling. You consider your to-do list. Still, there's a strange peace to it all. The pace slows. The world narrows. And just when you think your morning is done, a neighbor knocks, wrapped in furs and urgency. Their cellar trapdoor froze shut. Could you help? The snow deepens. The sun barely rises. But the rhythm of winter begins to settle into your bones. You're still picking straw out of your sleeves when someone hands you a bowl of something hot and beige. Breakfast, they say. You nod, suspicious of its texture, but grateful for the warmth seeping through the wooden bowl. It's barley porridge again, because it's a favorite, but because it's the only thing that doesn't run out midwinter. You duck under a hanging bundle of drying herbs that someone insists wards off bad spirits but mostly just gets in your hair. Then you pass the loom room. The longhouse smells like smoke and sleep. Your neighbor is still stirring his porridge. He hasn't blinked. In fact, you suspect he hasn't blinked since last Yule. Someone's toddler is yelling in Old Norse about a missing toy that's probably buried under a goat. The goat is asleep, mouth slightly open, chewing a dream. You shuffle toward your end of the longhouse. The plank walls groan with wind. A dog coughs. No one calls it that officially, it's just the far end of the hall, where the big loom dominates the space, like a creaking wooden beast. Which neighbor secretly adds juniper berries to their stew and pretends it's an old family recipe. One winks at you. Maul. You smile. You nod. You try not to drop your shuttle again. There's a row of tunics drying nearby, stiff as bark. You don't understand all the words, but it involves a bear, a stolen pancake, and a very patient hunter. You hum along. It's comforting, repetitive, like the loom, like the cold, like winter. Whether green dye was really that hard to make, or if everyone just pretended they hated it. You nod solemnly. No one likes green. Too cheerful. You poke one. It makes a sound like a drum, and all winter long it hums. Weaving never stops. You nod respectfully. She's seen things. This is where the real rhythm of Viking life unfolds beneath layers of wool, with frost on the beams and stories in the thread. You think it's broth, but it could also be weak beer. Either way, it's liquid, and it's not frozen. That's a win. You're cracked, calloused, and slightly purple from yesterday's failed attempt to ice fish. You'd rather not talk about it. Someone is snoring with purpose. Another coughs in a rhythmic, almost musical way. A third voice, uninvited, begins to sing a saga about a bear who stole a farmer's hat. The chorus is mostly grunts, but ordinary, slow, oddly communal. You're not just surviving the cold, you're weaving your place into a small, smoky, soot-streaked world. You're not the best weaver. You once managed to knot an entire tunic to your own sleeve. They pop and hiss, and suddenly it smells like your cousin's beard oil, which is to say, slightly alarming. You don't remember whose baby it is, but that's normal. You've developed a system. Step on your uncle's foot, dodge the toddler, slide past the dog pile, and hope no one's laid a trap of drying fish skins again. Viking households weren't just nuclear families. They were layered, extended, and communal. Grandparents, cousins, adopted kin, people who just stayed after last summer's feast. Once counted 19 people sleeping under one roof. That was before the dog had puppies. But everyone has to take a shift, especially in winter, when the chores multiply like rats and the days blur together into soft shades of brown and gray. You take your place by the loom and thread your shuttle. The warp threads stretch down like a curtain, swaying gently from the draft. The loom's rhythm-thumped pull hums oddly hypnotic. You can almost forget that your toes are numb. Historians agree Viking women were primarily responsible for weaving, spinning, and textile production.
Oh!
But in the winter, those lines blur. Everyone helps.
Ow.
Even the grumpy uncle who insists his joints can take the tension. Mysteriously becomes quite dexterous when food is on the line. The wool isn't just for clothing. You're weaving sails, trade goods, and layers for babies that don't exist yet. You're weaving a future that hasn't thawed yet. And while you work, the chatter begins. The loom corner is gossip central. Who's courting whom? Whose goat keeps escaping? Above you, dried fish dangled like little leathery flags. The walls are hung with bundles of wool, dyed in various shades of berry adjacent and moss surprise. Historians still argue. Someone mutters mid-weave. The old woman next to you starts humming a lullaby that dates back generations. Outside, the snow is now sideways. That's always a good sign. You glance at the fire. It's sputtering again. Someone tosses on a handful of pine cones. There's a baby somewhere in the room, cooing softly. A chicken wanders past your feet, trailing a bit of straw. You take a break to rub your hands. Then comes the part of the day where you do the longhouse shuffle, the slow, sidestepping navigation through a maze of half-sleeping bodies, tools, furs, and livestock to reach the fire. Success, you've made it to the hearth. You pour yourself a mug of something warm. The fire crackles. You can hear wind moaning through the smoke hole. You smile. You sip. You exist. This is winter life in the Viking world. Not grand, not violent, not storm-tossed and glorious. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Same loom, same porridge, same chicken. The loom creaks behind you as you step away, fingers aching, eyes slightly crossed from counting warp threads. You stretch carefully, so as not to knock over the drying fish skins. Someone's lined up for no clear reason, and shuffle back toward the middle of the longhouse. You've entered the loud room. That's when you hear it. The thrum of spinning wheels, the clack of bone combs, and the muffled sound of someone swearing at a knot. Not loud in the sense of yelling. Vikings aren't exactly known for open emotional expression, but loud in the way dozens of tiny, repetitive domestic sounds can blend into one rolling wave of cozy chaos. This is the weaving and woolworking corner of the longhouse, and it is run by a coalition of stern-faced women, one sarcastic uncle, and at least 3 small children pretending to card wool while secretly braiding each other's hair. The smell is earthy. You breathe through your mouth. You're quickly handed a bundle of wool rough, grayish, slightly damp-hand, a comb carved from antler. Then, without warning, she launches into a story about the time she found a snake in the wool pile and turned it into a belt. You don't ask follow-up questions. There are some things the gods don't want you to know. There's a pile of finished yarn in baskets, sorted by color. You shrug. Either way, you wouldn't want nettle underwear. Mostly natural shades, soft browns, cloudy whites, the occasional blush of berry dye from summer's harvest.
Ow.
Every now and then, someone experiments. The loom stands like a wooden sentinel at the end of the room, draped in threads that seem to go on forever. Of course it's sour. But it's not frozen. and it tastes vaguely like nutrition. The tension needs adjusting, always needs adjusting. You once saw a tunic dyed with boiled lichens that turned it the color of regret? Bold choice. Some are for that cousin who swears mugwort makes you dream of your ancestors. You had mugwort once. You dreamt of bread. One clever goat broke in, ate half the dried turnips, and proceeded to parade around the longhouse like a drunken warlord. You remember it well. Not just the loom's movement, but your body adjusting to the stillness of winter life. But in here, you're warm, busy, and surrounded by the oddly comforting sound of productivity. Your eyes drift toward the flicker of the hearth, where sparks rise like tiny ghosts. Someone begins a song about a swan maiden and a warrior who forgets her name. It doesn't end well, but it never does. To the tiny, repetitive tasks that make up your whole day, they're boring, yes, but in a way that quiets your mind. You wonder what the snow looks like on the mountains. You wonder if the foxhole is still active. You wonder how many more socks you'll make before spring. It's like snow falling on the same roof over and over. Like the clack of bone combs and the low hum of a lullaby sung in a language older than frost. You were wearing new socks. You were never seen again. It's your turn to help prep the next batch of thread, and your fingers are about to get a serious workout. Occasionally someone slaps a wool skein against the wall just to shake out the spirits. You nod along. You've done stranger. You sit near the fire where the light is best and begin pulling the wool through the comb, separating fibers and picking out little gifts from nature. Straw, sheep droppings, twigs, and something you hope is just moss. It's operated by your cousin. She's half asleep, still managing to draft perfect thread while gossiping and feeding a baby with her elbow. It's a level of multitasking you aspire to. Maybe in spring. One of the older women leans over, inspects your technique, and nods approvingly. As you comb, the spinning wheel hums beside you. Historians agree that a single sail for a ship could take hundreds of hours to spin and weave. It wasn't just clothing. It was currency, trade, pride, and it all started in this very room with hands like yours. And the ever-present danger of felting your work if you sneeze too hard. Wool was the lifeblood of Viking winter industry.
Oh.
You glance around. Historians still argue, someone mutters from across the room, whether Vikings really used nettles for fabric, or if that is just something monks made up to make them sound tougher. The fire pops. Someone laughs. A toddler tries to spin yarn and ends up tangling themselves to a chair. No one helps them immediately. This is how one learns. You're assigned to the loom next again. Your back protests, but you obey. As you step up to begin weaving again, someone slides a cup of warm buttermilk into your hand. You accept it like a sacred offering. It's sour. Above you, bundles of herbs and roots hang from the rafters. Some are for dye, some are for healing. Weaving isn't silent. There's constant murmuring, clicking, low singing. It's during one of these quiet weaving stretches that the conversation inevitably turns to the goat incident. It always does. Last winter, someone forgot to latch the feed bin. The weaving room erupts in soft chuckles. The goat, now older and slightly wiser, sleeps under the loom. You suspect it's still plotting. You feel a rhythm settling in. Outside, the wind hisses. The roof creaks. You set your shuttle down and stretch again. The wool on your lap smells faintly of sheep and firewood. You settle back into your weaving. The pattern is simple, the motion automatic. Your thoughts drift. Answer, all of them. Every sock. You wake up to the sound of chewing, not yours, not a person's. It's unmistakably the rhythmic, slightly resentful gnawing of a cow working through the last of the hay ration. You open your eyes slowly. Everything is still dim, lit only by the last coals of the fire and the pale blue of a winter dawn leaking in through the smoke hole. Your breath fogs in the air. Congratulations, it's cold. The cold air hits your face like a slap from a very disapproving ice spirit. Your stomach rumbles in protest, and so begins the morning ritual, one you now perform with near sacred precision. First, find your boots without stepping on anyone's head. Second, check that no livestock have wandered into the sleeping area again. Third, descend into the food cellar and hope it hasn't turned into a frozen cave of despair. They dried fish, smoked meat, fermented dairy, and even pickled vegetables with an enthusiasm you've come to respect, tan slightly fear. There's something deeply humbling about knowing your dinner has been buried in brine since midsummer. Most of the real fresh food is long gone. Winter is about preservation, and accepting that 80% of your meals will involve root vegetables and creative lying. Adds a little crunch, he says, winking. You believe him? You wish you didn't? You grab a torch and make your way toward the trapdoor near the back of the longhouse where the food stores are kept. You lift the heavy wooden lid. But I say, if you're going to suffer through this flavor, you may as well do it together. Welcome to the cellar. The shelves are crammed with jars, bundles, and sacks each labeled in your head with hopeful titles like berries, to be edible, not the worst fish, or do not open until the solstice. You unwrap it cautiously. Inside is a chunk of dried apple. You wish you were making that up? You are not. It smells like something that could summon Odin himself, probably by mistake. They didn't just eat to survive, they made it a ritual. Food wasn't wasted. Bones were boiled, fats were rendered, and even the water from soaking grains was used in thin soups or to rinse wool. You hope they're not the kind that make people see visions of talking wolves again. Multitasking at its finest. You blink. You haven't seen fruit in weeks. Where did this come from? You reach for a turnip the size of a baby's head. It stares back. You wince. You take it anyway? You rotate the smoked meat, some of which is older than your dog, and check the dried herbs hanging near the fire. Mint, thyme, and angelica, not for flavor, for your stomach. You can hear the distant sound of someone chopping wood. It's probably regretting all their life choices, which currently feels like it might revolt if fed one more turnip. They vanish before you can trade chores for another piece. It's proof that summer existed and might come back someday. A large iron pot is suspended over the flames, hissing gently. Today's meal will be a mash of tubers, onion scraps, and whatever the gods provide, which usually means the one sad carrot someone forgot to count. Mind pleasantly fogged by the simplicity of stew and slow hours. The cellar is full. The hearth is glowing. And for a little while, you're not worried about running out of food or turnips. You close the lid. You dip your wooden spoon in and get a chunk of turnip, something that might be parsnip, and one glorious slice of dried sausage. It's more like a dense weapon-grade disc of barley and rye, cooked on a hot stone and beaten into submission with a spoon. You tear off a piece. It resists. You dunk it in the stew. It resists less. You chew and chew. You begin to see why people wrote sagas. It was probably the only way to distract from chewing. You chew like it's treasure. Vikings, despite their pillaging reputation, were remarkably good at food preservation. You spot a clay pot of fermented herring and pretend you didn't. That's a meal for someone who lost a bet. There's a barrel of sour milk, which you're told is now technically cheese. You stir it once. It stirs back. You haul your turnip prize up into the longhouse where someone is already tending the fire. As you chop your turnip, your neighbor tells a story about how last winter they ran out of salt and had to season everything with burnt bark. Historians still argue, he adds, more seriously now, whether Viking stews were made in shared family pots or individualized by household. You nod in solemn agreement and stir the pot with a carved wooden spoon. That's older than your cousin S marriage. A child nearby offers you something wrapped in linen. The child shrugs. Secret. You toss it into the stew. It's barely a bite, but it adds a hint of sweetness in, the illusion that you're not just eating sadness mash again. Like in the corner, someone is experimenting with fermenting fish heads and mead. Still, there's creativity to it all. Viking winter cooking isn't fancy, but it is determined. Lunch is served in a communal bowl, passed from hand to hand. Meanwhile, your cousin is experimenting with drying mushrooms near the hearth, and then there's the bread. Well, calling it bread might be generous. Still, it's warm. It fills your belly, and it doesn't taste like despair. Much after the meal, you help refill the storage shelves. Food is more than sustenance in winter. It's time. It's memory. The snow outside is now falling heavier, clumping on the roof with muffled thuds. You lean back, hands warm from the fire, stomach full-ish. The sun never fully rises in the heart of a Viking winter. Instead, it loiters near the horizon like a lazy candle, giving just enough light to remind you what you're missing. Outside the longhouse, it's a world of wind and white. You pull it close and wait, 'cause tonight, like every night, someone will tell a story. But inside, the glow of fire, the steam of soup, and the low murmur of stories fill the air like smoke. You're seated near the hearth again, this time with a mug of something warm cupped in both hands. It may be broth, may be heavily watered down ale, may in fact be yesterday's tea, reheated with a sprig of thyme and a lye. Either way, it warms your fingers, and in winter, that's currency. The children settle in first half sleep, half squirming, bundled in furs like tiny burritos. Someone tosses a sheepskin over your shoulders, and it begins the same way it always does. Let me tell you of Thorgrim the Flat-Footed. There's the long, convoluted saga of how your great-uncle tried to marry a Selkie and ended up with 3 angry seals and a broken nose. The name alone earns a snort from the loom corner, the storyteller replies solemnly, because it's very hard to be brave when your feet are frozen. But the story rolls on, in that slow, dragging cadence that puts your brain on a sled and gently nudges it downhill. The longhouse is hushed except for the voice, the wind, and the occasional sleepy cough. You are told this with such conviction, such reverent tone, that you nod along as if that's a completely normal thing to do during a blizzard. There are family stories, ones that come out only after the second mug of ale and the third turnip stew. Someone throws another log on the fire. Sparks leap up like startled spirits. Tales of people who wandered too far from the settlement and claimed they saw lights dancing on the snow. Of old men who swore the trees whispered during snowstorms. Of children who went out to pee and came back talking to foxes. The bear, the story insists, blinked first. Thorgrim, you learn, once challenged a bear to a staring contest. No one laughs. Geese are terrifying. It's either centuries old or very committed to being sour. You eat it anyway. You sip your mystery drink. It tastes slightly like regret. Now it's about a man who refused to leave his longhouse for 30 winters and became part of the wall, literally. Now it's about a sheep who solved a murder, it reminds you, with every exaggerated bear tale or long-winded marriage drama. That people have always been a little weird and always will be. You can just make out the carved marks from generations past. Names, symbols, crude jokes scratched into wood with fish bones. The teller pauses for dramatic effect. The fire pops obligingly. A dog groans in its sleep. So is the dog. The goat might be pretending. They were oral memory, ancestral teaching, and a form of psychological winter survival. And imagine a bear blinking in surprise, somewhere on a snowy hill. You can only spin wool for so many hours before your mind begs for a little drama, not just through food and wool and daily chores, but through story, through laughter, through the familiar rhythms of tales told again and again until they become part of your bones. These stories, historians note, weren't just for fun. You remember how your mother told it, her fingers absently combing your hair, her voice soft as snowfall, and drama you get.
Ow.
There's the tale of Brinja, the black-toothed, who built a boat entirely out of goat bones and tried to sail it across a frozen lake. No one's quite sure which parts are true, but truth is bendy in winter, like flatbread. One child interrupts to ask why all the heroes seem to forget their swords at crucial moments. You nod. You understand this deeply. The fire crackles louder now. Shadows dance across the smoke-dark ceiling beams. Some nights, it's not just sagas that get shared. Historians still argue. Someone murmurs, poking the fire. Whether those were just hallucinations from eating spoiled rye, but you never know. You shift a little closer to the fire. The wind outside howls like a ghost with a bad sense of timing. There's something deeply grounding about storytelling. Stitches together the hours and makes sense of the dark. A story finishes. There's silence. Then another voice begins. This one speaks slowly, more measured, about a king from the southern lands who wore a golden cloak and feared geese. You settle deeper into your blanket. Your mug is empty. Your mind drifts. You remember a story from your own childhood about a snow hare that stole fire from the sun and gave it to the first Vikings. Someone passes around a small pouch of dried berries. You take one, chew thoughtfully, and immediately regret it. The sagas continue. It's about a girl who whispered to seals and turned into smoke. You're not sure where history ends and dreaming begins. One of the older women starts humming. It's not a song you know, but it sounds like lullabies and ice thawing. The kids are asleep now. You lie back on your bedding straw and fur and a slightly lumpy cushion and stare at the rafters above, where herbs hang like sleeping bats. The fire dims, the voices fade, but the warmth lingers. This, you realize, is winter survival. And as the wind curls around the longhouse like an old cold dog settling in for sleep, you close your eyes and imagine a bear blinking in surprise somewhere on a snowy hill. The rooster doesn't crow in winter? Not really. He just sort of mutters from his perch in the rafters, like a grumpy philosopher disturbed too early. Still, it's enough to wake you along with the distant sound of hooves, not outside, inside. You crack one eye open. There it is again, a faint clop, a soft snort, and the unmistakable damp whiff of livestock breath. Ah, yes, the part of Viking winter no one writes sagas about, animals in the house. In the colder months, animals were often brought indoors, or at least into the semi-divided areas of the structure to keep them from freezing and, in a bonus side effect, provide a little extra warmth to the household. But the goats have opinions, and one of them is currently standing in the firewood pile. Nothing says cozy like a cow's backside radiating body heat near your pillow. Viking longhouses weren't just for people. You sit up slowly, wrapped in fur and regret, and tiptoe across the room. The floorboards creak. So does your spine. It's early. Too early. You're not mad, just disappointed. You shoo her away gently like a disappointed parent. She stares at you like you've betrayed her. You rub her head gently, and she leans into your hand, her eyes half closed in sleepy approval. For a brief moment, you understand peace. You turn to see them attempting to ride a sleepy sheep. The sheep tolerates this with saintly patience until the child squeals too loud and is gently ejected onto the straw floor. No injuries, just pride. Others argue that animals and humans cohabited more fluidly during harsher weather. You believe both, especially when the piglet tries to climb into your sleeping blanket. No one says a word. It's too early for jokes. Besides, there's a dignity in chores. At least that's what the elders say while they avoid doing any. But they ripple through the longhouse like steam off soup.
Ow!
It's strangely calming. Last week, the pig knocked over the storage chest and stole a bundle of dried mushrooms. You've had more conversations with the chicken than you'd like to admit. She's a good listener. He was unwell for 2 days. You'll never look at Stu the same way again. You've offended the cow once. Won't do it again. Historians still debate how the interior layout of Viking longhouses was divided. Some believe there were designated animal stalls at one end. The knowledge that, despite the snow and ice and darkness outside, there is life within, breath, warmth, movement, tiny hooves tip-tapping across the floor while you peel, onions and hum old songs. Mostly, a cow snorts behind you, the pig snores, someone's sheep burps, but it's warm, it's full of life. It's the odd, unglamorous truth of Viking winter, that you don't face it alone. You face it surrounded by fur and feathers and breath. You are declared official. Hey, dispenser, you take your job seriously. The wind howls through the gaps in the roof beams, but the hearth blazes strong. The animals settle in, chickens roosting in corners, goats curled up like smug little blankets, and the dog wedged under a bench with 3 feet sticking out. The longhouse smells like smoke and sheep and stale bread. You sip the hot liquid handed to you, still not sure if it's still runoff, but it's warm, and that's enough. Today's morning routine involves feeding the animals first, because if you don't, they remind you, loudly. With their hooves, you are hailed as a hero, or at least given half a flatbread and a pat on the shoulder. You scoop hay into the troughs, check water buckets for ice, and give the horse a side eye when he tries to eat your mitten. Sort of not completely. You still light extra candles near the pig. There's a goat with a limp that's been slowly improving. Back at the hearth, someone's already started the fire and set a kettle over the coals. Child giggles behind you. You've grown used to the noise. It's a grunts and bleats. The occasional sudden crash. It's a cluck-cluck-cluck of hens announcing their triumphs. The quiet chewing of cud. The occasional dramatic sneeze from the goat that lives too close to the hearth. Still, animals in the house mean warmth, milk, eggs, and company. Someone passes by holding a bucket of manure. You help your neighbor sweep the straw floor, not for cleanliness exactly, but for comfort. It keeps the place from smelling entirely like a barn. In the quiet lull between chores and breakfast, someone starts tuning a lyre. The notes are uneven, sleepy, half-formed. And then you hear it, the low, unholy gurgle of the cow, about to relieve herself right where your cousin stores his shoes. You leap into action. Crisis is averted. Barely. Historians still argue, your cousin mutters, adjusting his now slightly damp boots, whether the gods punish pride with bad luck or just a very moody cow. You nod solemnly. Throughout the day, the animals become part of the rhythm. You even grow used to the smells. But it's not just practical. There's comfort in proximity. In the afternoon, a child builds a pretend barn from firewood and assigns each sibling a role. Evening falls, soft and slow. You lie down again, wrapped in furs, head close to the wall. It's chaos, yes. It's loud. It's occasionally pungent. And as the fire dims to glowing embers, you drift off to sleep with the strange comfort of knowing that, in the morning, the rooster will mutter. Oh, the goat will steal something, and the cycle will begin again. Midwinter doesn't ask for much. It's just your patience, your toes, and most of your good humor. You wake to a strange silence. No wind, no hooves. No clucking or low grunts of complaint from the livestock. For a moment, you wonder if you've overslept or died peacefully in your sleep from turnip poisoning. But no, the fire's still warm. The air still smells like wool and slightly overboiled barley. Life continues. Outside, the world has vanished into white. Snow, thick and heavy, has buried everything in sight. It means a rare thing: rest. The roof groans under its weight, and the doorway is now blocked by a glorious frozen wall of nope. Congratulations, it's a snow day. Someone attempts to dig out the entrance using a flat-bottomed basket and a lot of sarcasm. It's going badly. Stitching on the toe is given up entirely, like a bard who forgot the words to his own saga. You decide wisely to stay inside. Snow this deep means no chores, no errands, no visits to the neighbor who always wants to talk about axe sharpening, and settle near the hearth. The light is just enough. Either way, the thread remembers, against decay, against the entropy of too many winters. You repair mittens, then socks. It's a symphony of small repairs. No one rushes. No one complains. There's nowhere to go. UV learned to tell the difference between this will scab and this will need herbs. It looks terrible. You wrestle it into place with a knife tip and a prayer. It works. Mostly, you eat it gratefully, even if it does resemble a beige glacier. For the wool socks that now have slightly fewer holes, the storm has made the world small and the hearth big, and a tunic that somehow ripped itself in the night. The longhouse has become a quiet factory of things made useful again. There's no music, just the crackle of fire and the soft scrape of knife on wood. No one rushes, no one sighs. The snow may trap you, but it also grants permission to slow down, to mend, to breathe. The smell of wood smoke curls around you as you begin patching like a warrior mending armor, except your armor is leather and smells vaguely of fermented goat. The tools packed up. The bits of wool swept back into baskets. The hearth burns a little higher, and someone starts making bread. Flat, heavy, and indestructible as always. A tiny sleigh, complete with wheels that will never roll properly. You smile. It's crooked and perfect. The net is knotted. Spoon exists that didn't exist this morning. That counts as creation. But rest, in Viking terms, doesn't mean doing nothing. It just means doing slightly less than usual, while pretending to be very busy. Each fixed seam, each reinforced boot is a promise. We'll make it to spring. We'll wear these clothes again. We'll walk these paths again without sinking to our hips. Today, the big project is repairs. Not out of necessity, but because whittling is the Viking version of daydreaming. You sit with a bit of driftwood in your lap and begin shaping it into something, maybe a spoon, maybe a comb, maybe a very small dragon. You begin by inspecting your boots. They've survived 2 winters, 3 river crossings, and 1 unfortunate chicken stampede incident. You retrieve your sewing kit, a bundle of bone needles, sinew thread, and a mysterious pouch labeled buttons. Mending isn't glamorous, but it's deeply satisfying. Every stitch is a tiny defiance against the cold. Nearby, your grandmother is reknotting a net. Not for fishing, those days are long gone, but for hanging bundles of onions near the rafters. She works slowly, her fingers weathered and sure. You watch her hands and realize she's done this 1,000 times. Maybe more. Historians still argue, she says quietly, without looking up. Whether Viking women learned these skills as children, or just picked them up by necessity. You don't fully understand what that means, but you nod like you do. It sounds wise. Around you, others are patching, fixing, restuffing cushions with straw, adjusting shield straps, sharpening wooden spoons. You pause to rewrap your fingers with a bit of cloth. Needle pokes are part of the job. From across the room, someone holds up a repaired cloak like a banner of victory. It has new patches in 3 different shades of brown. Lunch today is leftovers from yesterday's stew, now thick enough to sculpt. Afterward, You help replace a broken hinge on the storage chest. The hinge is made from bone and stubbornness. The snow outside keeps falling. You can hear it, a soft hiss, like the world whispering. You're thankful for the roof, for the thick walls. Repairs aren't just about survival. They're about continuity. In the late afternoon, you switch to carving. Your cousin joins you, working on a wooden toy for the youngest child. Someone else is fixing a harp. Another is resealing a barrel. You look around and see the patience of winter carved into every face. As evening creeps in, the repairs are set aside. You flex your fingers, sore but warm. The boots are patched. The mittens restitched. The snow presses against the walls like a quiet giant. But inside, all is calm. And as you settle back into your fur bedding, the repaired world hums softly around you. Nothing perfect, but everything holding together just enough. You wake not to a sound, but to a smell. Something different, not smoke, not wool, not pig breath or boiled barley or your uncle's feet. Something sweet. You sit up slowly, blinking against the dim orange light of early fire. Across the longhouse, someone is crouched beside the hearth, carefully lifting a heavy clay pot wrapped in layers of cloth and straw. The pot steams. From that steam rises a scent that stirs memories buried under layers of snow and turnips. Honey. The pot hisses and pops, and a smile spreads across your face before you've even said a word. Today, it seems, is brewing day. Too fast and you lose heat. Too slow and you get scolded by the elder in charge of today's brewing. You stir as if the fate of Yggdrasil depends on it. You shuffle closer, wrapped in blankets like a very motivated caterpillar. Mead? She winks. I say both. The Vikings' golden drink of gods and goat herders alike, and possibly vengeance. You blink once. But today, it's not just about food, it's about celebration. You string up dried herbs like garlands. You light every single candle, even the slightly lopsided ones. Someone unearths a wheel of aged cheese and treats it like treasure. You don't say anything. Everyone nods approvingly. It's about the origin of snow, which according to them involves a frost giant with itchy knees and a terrible sense of rhythm. You laugh mid-sip. The mead dribbles down your chin. No one judges you. You lose within 4 moves and pretend it was on purpose. Everyone is very impressed with your noble sacrifice. It's off-key. Now no one cares. But when they do, they remind everyone what it means to live through winter, not just with survival, but with spirit, with spice, with sweetness. And winter, with its endless darkness and enforced stillness, is the perfect time to make it. Every family has their own mead blend. Some are delicious. Some taste like regret and floorboards. Its batch smells promising. It contains last year's mead, now fermented into something strong enough to knock out a mid-sized elk. You're offered a sip. They smell wonderful. They taste like charcoal and effort. Everyone praises them anyway. Laughter bounces off the beams like birds startled from branches. They make exaggerated gagging faces, then quietly ask for more. A rite of passage. One person has fallen asleep, mid-chew. Another is snoring into a plate of barley cake. It's all very dignified. You offer your hands to help and are immediately tasked with stirring. Not a ceremonial role, but one of great consequence. Toasts were made with it. Oaths sworn over it. Connected the mundane with the mythic. As the honeyed mixture warms over the fire, someone begins adding herbs. Juniper, yarrow, maybe a bit of spruce tip if you're feeling fancy. There's magic in a tor at least, patience dressed in bubbles. Historians still argue, the elder says, handing you a carved ladle. Whether Vikings flavored their mead to mask the spoilage or to impress their gods. The longhouse begins to stir literally and figuratively as the scent drifts to every corner. Even the goat lifts her head. A child yawns theatrically. The pig rolls over and kicks a shoe across the floor. Brewing is a group activity. It brings people together, not just for the drinking later, but for the ritual itself. Heating, stirring, pouring, waiting. Someone brings out a second pot, smaller, older, with a notch in the rim shaped like a wolf's tooth. It tastes like fire and flowers. Later in the day, once the brewing has finished, and the pots are covered and tucked in for their long fermenting nap, the feasting begins. Feast is a generous word. It's still the middle of winter, after all. You'll help prepare a dish that's only made on brewing days. Barley cakes with wild herbs and crushed nuts. In the corner, someone tunes a lyre. Vikings didn't brew mead just for the buzz. It was part of ritual, of storytelling, of legacy. Poems were dedicated to it. Tonight, you raise your carved cup in honor of the ancestors, who somehow figured out how to ferment be spit into liquid joy. Across the fire, a cousin begins reciting a poem, half memory, half improvisation. The younger children are allowed a taste of mead watered down, of course. Someone brings out a carved board for Hannah Feedoff, the Viking chess. The night grows warmer somehow, even as the wind picks up outside. The candles flicker. The fire snaps. You glance toward the sleeping area. Most are still awake, still leaning in, still laughing softly. Brewing days don't happen often, and as you lay back later, just slightly lightheaded and full of slightly burned bread, you feel it settle in your chest. Warmth, community, and the soft golden haze of honey dreams. Outside, the snow still falls. Yet inside, the mead is tucked away for spring. Your heart is full, and your cup just for tonight is empty. The mead still hums softly in your blood when morning comes, like the last note of a song long after it's finished. Your head isn't exactly hurting, but it's floating slightly above your shoulders. Your hands seem to slow for your body. That's how you know. Yesterday was worth it. And today? Today is cleaning day. No, this is midwinter maintenance, the kind that involves scraping soot off the rafters, evicting mice from grain sacks, and asking philosophical questions like, what even is that smell? You sigh. Of course it is. Not the glamorous springtime kind of cleaning with birdsong and flower-swept doorsteps. You start with the ashes. It's used for everything. Cleaning soap, tanning, hides, even brushing teeth if you're feeling particularly optimistic. You try not to think about that as you brush some from your shirt. The hearth, faithful and sputtering, has been burning for weeks without pause. The trick is to leave just enough to start again without using up too much precious kindling. You just sweep it again, slowly, like a monk tending a very chaotic temple. There's a balance to it, like life itself, but with more splinters. Now as you chip frost from the seams and plug gaps with moss, it feels like building a fortress with chewing gum. That means a mountain of soft gray ash now sits at the base like the ghost of every log you've ever burned. You gently encourage the inhabitants to relocate. One of them stares at you with the weary gaze of a single mother. You'll back away slowly, you understand. You take up the ash scoop carved from bone and older than your knees and begin transferring it to a clay bucket. The smoke from the hearth preserves everything, but it also coats it in black dust that clings to your hands and makes your nose itch. And it needs replacing every few days, or it becomes a mat of mashed food bits, hair, animal droppings, and dreams deferred. You gather the worst patches into a heap, which is promptly claimed by the goat for mysterious purposes. You lay down fresh straw in its place, soft, golden, and sweet-smelling. They're doing well. You check the meat bundles next. Only one has grown something blue. They're using melted snow and a slab of soapstone. The water is cold enough to make your bones wince from across the room. You nod in solidarity. There's no feast, no poem, no toast to the gods, just a slightly tidier house, fire that burns a little cleaner, straw that feels softer under your feet. You inhale, and the air smells slightly less like goat. You've scrubbed and straightened and warmed it with your effort. It responds in its way. Someone hands you a mug of hot broth. You drink it slowly, watching the flicker of the flames bounce off the clean hearthstones. Less creaky. The pig is missing, but only briefly he returns with half a boot. More settled. Like it's breathing with you. It's negotiated with. It's one repair, one story, one sweep at a time. Success. This means everything is removed, played with, argued over, and then reinserted in an order even Odin wouldn't understand. You praise their effort, and fix it yourself when they're not looking. They nod back with the hollow gaze of someone who's done this before. Cut it off, sniff cautiously, and declare it's still edible. Probably ash isn't waste. Not in a Viking house. Once the hearth is cleared, you rake through the coals, saving the glowing ones for the day's fire. Next, the floor. You both agree it's probably both. The sun never truly rises, but a pale gray glow filters through the doorway now that it's been unburied again. You open it for a few minutes to let in air and immediately regret it. The wind slaps you with icy fingers and screams something about bad life choices. You shut the door. Quickly, it's straw. Always straw. Immediately, a child runs through it and distributes it evenly across the entire house. You don't comment? Historians still argue. Someone grumbles as they wipe soot off the beams. Whether Vikings swept their houses daily or just accepted the dirt as insulation, you move to the walls next. They're made of thick timber, daubed with clay and animal hair. During the summer, this seemed quaint. Still the walls hold. Mostly, you light a pine torch and inspect the corners for signs of rot or critters. There's a mouse nest behind the grain bin. Then comes the rafters. This is where the dried food hangs: fish, meat, herbs, the occasional mysterious bundle no one dares touch. You climb a stool, knock your head once on the ceiling beam, and begin brushing the soot off the fish. You pause. Think about that sentence. Keep brushing. The fish are firm, leathery, and smell like salt and old decisions. Someone else is washing the wool blankets near the back of the longhouse. In the middle of the longhouse, the children are tasked with organizing the tool chest. Afternoon rolls in like thick soup. Cleaning day doesn't end with applause. There's something else too. A feeling. A quiet one. You've touched every part of this home today. It's from soot to straw, beam to barrel. You settle by the fire again, your fingers raw, but your mind clear. A dog curls up at your feet. Chicken pecks at the fresh straw. The house is clean, or cleanish. For a Viking. And in this moment, with the storm still swirling outside and the warmth pooling around your ankles like sunlight, you feel the deep, comforting truth of it all. Winter isn't conquered. It's negotiated with. One repair, one story, one sweep at a time. The house is clean, the fire is steady, and the animals have miraculously stopped trying to eat your bedding. It would almost feel like a rest day, if not for the enormous pile of wool in the center of the room. Yes, today is spinning and weaving day. And by the end, you'll be finding bits of wool in your stew again. You sigh. Not because you mind it, but because you know your hands will be sore by sunset. Your thighs will be dusted with fiber. The longhouse shifts. Benches are dragged into place. The loom creaks as it's pulled from the shadows. It stands tall and crooked like an old warrior with bad knees. It was built by someone who definitely knew how to make boats but tried their best. The first step is carding brushing the fibers to align them. Two wooden paddles with rows of sharp little teeth scrape back and forth with a rhythm that's almost soothing. Almost one of them wraps a thread around the goat's horns and declares it royalty. The goat disagrees. Violently, you take your place near a basket of wool clumps. Raw, slightly greasy, still faintly smelling of sheep. Nothing goes to waste. Not here, not now. You card, you spin, you draft the wool into long, thin ropes of fluff, pulling gently as the spindle twists, twisting as you pull. The Norns, who wove the fates of men. The goddess Frigg, often depicted at her spindle. You find yourself matching the rhythm with your spindle. There's power in making thread, tying fibers together and deciding their path. She smiles, but either way it made the world go round. The steam rising from the pot smells. Creative. You ask what color it'll be? Hopeful brown, they reply. That's the strange intimacy of Viking textile work. You don't just make things, you make history, soft and slow and threaded through with breath. It's like chewing through a sweater and multitasking, but it works. You even manage not to drop the spindle once. Someone is already stitching new mittens for the children. Another is cutting patches for the sleeping blankets. It's a kind of magic turning clouds into thread. And unlike most magic, this one makes your back ache, but it's yours, and it will last. It's meticulous work, requiring focus, patience, and fingers that haven't been cracked by winter wind. It looks, just for a moment, like it was spun from sunlight. You offer to help, and are politely told to stick to spinning. Historians still argue, says the old woman to your left. Whether the Vikings thought spinning was sacred, or just really, really annoying, the spindle hums in your hands. You look down, surprised to see a neat coil of yarn already wound. It's not beautiful, but it's strong, and that's enough. Children play nearby, tangling wool and pretending it's sea serpent hair. Your back may never be the same, with future warmth, a thread that binds not just cloth but kin. At the loom, someone is threading heddles, those thin cords that lift the warp threads and patterns. You don't envy them. Fine. The woven cloth will become tunics, cloaks, wall hangings. Or if the pattern goes wrong halfway through, rag strips for sandals. You spin more, you hum. Stretch your arms and listen to the loom's rhythmic clack-clack as someone presses the beater bar into the growing fabric. There's a reason weaving features so heavily in mythology. You wonder briefly if the cloth you're making will end up in a wedding dress or a winter shroud. Someone near the hearth begins singing. It's not a song with words, just long vowel sounds stretched across the firelight like threads of their own. In the far corner, your cousin is dyeing yarn with onion skins and crushed lichen. Lunch comes late. You eat while still spinning, biting into flatbread between stretches of wool. By late afternoon, the pile of wool has shrunk, and a new one has grown, this time made of skeins and folded cloth. The loom creaks slower now. The singing has stopped. The goat is asleep, still wearing a crown of thread. Your hands ache, but it's the good kind, the kind that says you made something today. You help wind the yarn onto storage rods and tuck the leftover wool back into sacks. Your arms are dusted in fiber. Your tunic smells faintly of sheep, but the house feels richer now. Not with gold or silver, but with utility. You sit by the fire again, holding a small piece of the fabric woven today. It's crooked. The edges are wavy. The color is arguably beige. The flickering light of the hearth makes the cloth glow amber, and you smile, because in the long dark of winter, even a scrap of cloth can feel like a victory. By now, winter has folded itself into your bones. You don't count the days anymore. You count the sounds. How many times the wind howled before dawn? How many logs cracked in the fire? how many spoons clattered into the stew pot. But today, there's a different rhythm of faint tapping, soft and deliberate. You follow it past the fire pit and the loom, past the goat still wearing thread like a crown, toward the edge of the longhouse where a figure crouches over a pile of small bones and wood chips. No one tells you what to carve. That's part of the charm. You start cutting not with purpose, but with curiosity. It's carving day. Or, as your uncle likes to call it, the day of 1,000 tiny blisters. It's what you did when the world outside became a snowdrift and your fingers needed something to do besides frostbite. The room is quiet except for the tap, tap, tap of tools and the occasional grunt from someone who's carved too deep and is now pretending they meant to do that. A squirrel, maybe, or a snake with a very judgmental face. You give it eyes with the tip of your blade and then feel oddly proud. The king piece gets extra detail, a small crown, a stern face, an accidental chip that gives him character. But inside, you are shaping wood, giving form to boredom, giving shape to silence. You join him on the floor, take a seat on a bundle of straw, and pick up a dull knife and a soft piece of birch. You sand it with a bit of horsetail and set it on the table like an offering. Everyone tells them it's beautiful. They glow. The wood gives in slowly, like it wants to become something more than firewood. They etch them into a small piece of driftwood, whispering a chant under their breath. Makes the gods think you're ready for the next world. Whether it's a prayer or a curse, you decide not to ask. He holds up a small horse figurine. I say both. Everyone sets out what they've made. Bowls, beads, combs, figurines, crude tools, polished stones with strange symbols. The longhouse becomes a gallery of things that didn't exist yesterday. The rules change depending on who's playing, which keeps things interesting, especially when the horse has better posture than I do. The knife slides through the wood in short, patient strokes. You carve your cousin's name instead. He laughs and calls it flattery. It smells slightly awful and requires more patience than you thought possible. She loves it anyway. Historians still argue, your uncle mutters without looking up, whether Vikings carved mostly for utility or for art. And in a season where time melts together like snow on a hearthstone, having something to show for the day is everything. Every Viking longhouse had its share of carved objects, combs, toys, game boards, bowls, amulets. Your hands are sore. Your back stings. There's wood dust in your hair. You finish shaping the head of something. Nearby, a child is carving a bird. It has one wing and no beak. Across the room, someone else works on a new game board. Nefertov, the Viking war game with a king and his defenders, surrounded by attackers. You help shape the game pieces next. Round pebbles for attackers, bone discs for defenders. Outside, the storm rises again. Snow pelts the roof with the soft hiss of 1,000 secrets. Carving is quiet, thoughtful, repetitive in a way that soothes your winter-numbed brain. The blade becomes an extension of your hand. You carve a spoon next, your 5th this winter. It will probably splinter, but maybe not. Next to you, someone's carving runes and Shantian letters with angles sharp enough to bite your fingers. Don't carve your own name, someone warns gently. Luck. You nod. That's fair. In the afternoon, you help string together small pieces of antler into a necklace for your aunt. The children carve dolls. One is missing a leg. One is missing a head. One is just a stick with attitude. They parade them around proudly. The day ends not with a feast, but with a display. Not all of it is beautiful. Some of it is barely functional. But it's real. You wrap your carving tools in a bit of cloth and tuck them under your bedroll. But you sleep easy, 'cause you shaped something today. 'Cause the longhouse holds not just people, but pieces of imagination, smoothed and sanded and given form by hands just like yours. And because in the morning, you'll carve something new. The longhouse creaks with the weight of snow above and lives within. You wake to the soft groan of wood adjusting itself, as if the beams are stretching after a long night's sleep. You roll over, pull your fur tighter, and consider not moving at all.
House.
No shouting, no clang of swords or thunderous Viking raids. Just the soft murmur of stories being told. But when the weather closes in too tightly, when the snow stacks high against the walls, and the goats refuse to go outside even for mischief, the longhouse does what it does best. It tells itself stories to stay alive. But the day has already started around you, quietly of course. Someone has added peat to the coals, and it hisses gently like it's whispering along with the voices gathered there. She is halfway through a tale about a sea spirit who lived inside a fish and tricked a chieftain into marrying her. No one remembers how it started, but no one wants it to end. Sagas passed from mouth to ear across generations, reshaped slightly with each telling, but grounded in core truths. They were memory. They were law. They were how you remembered who you were and how to be someone worth remembering. It isn't even true technically, but it feels true. You clear your throat and begin, because today is story day, not officially, of course. You sit up and shuffle toward the hearth, where the fire is already glowing low and golden. They played riddles until dawn, and when the sun rose, the hunter found himself with a full stomach and a beard made of moss. Then a haunting fragment of an old song that trails off before the last verse, because no one remembers how it ends. But by the time you finish, everyone's smiling. Even the fire crackles in approval. The elder leading the storytelling today is your cousin's grandmother, a woman with one eye sharper than most people, S2, and a laugh like cracked ice, listening, imagining, carrying these tales inside, them like embers to be lit again later. You settle into a blanket and sip a bit of broth, the smoky taste warming you from within as her voice weaves through the air like thread through a loom. In Viking culture, oral storytelling wasn't just entertainment, it was legacy. There is a tale of two brothers who accidentally swapped shoes before a wedding and caused a minor scandal. Each row of thread a symbol, each color a piece of memory. Slow, gentle, mysterious. You feel yourself drifting even before it ends. It's a scene of boats on ice, of wolves at the edge of the firelight, of people huddled together telling stories like the one you're telling now. Even the story of how your aunt met your uncle, he stole her cloak as a joke and then married her to get away with it. Historians still argue, the old woman says with a wink, whether the gods themselves gave us stories or if we just made them up to explain why goats are so mean. They remind you that you belong to something bigger than yourself, something old, strange, and still alive. But it feels lighter now, as if the stories have swept some of the winter out through the smoke hole. A younger one this time, spinning a tale about a mountain troll with 3 noses and a fear of turnips. It's absurd. It's delightful. It's exactly what you needed. Everyone laughs. Even the goat snorts. After the first story ends, another voice picks up. You're invited to share next. You hesitate. Your story isn't a saga. It happened on a night much like this one, cold enough to freeze your eyebrows off, and dark enough that your shadow got lost on the way to bed. The listeners lean in. Tell of a lone hunter who lost his way in a snowstorm and found refuge in a hollowed-out tree, only to discover the tree was alive. I'm very bored. It's nonsense, really. Someone else chimes in with a poem, then a riddle. The longhouse has changed. Still cold, still crowded, still filled with the occasional waft of pig. You glance up and see even the children are quiet. And it's not just old myths and troll tales. There's a story about the first time someone fell into the grain pit and had to be rescued with a hay fork. Real or not, it doesn't matter. The longhouse is full of laughter, sighs, knowing nods, and wide-eyed children clinging to the endings. Later in the day, you help someone stitch a new story into a wall hanging literally. As evening falls, the stories turn quieter, sleepier. One last tale, whispered in near darkness, about the god Odin disguising himself as a beggar to learn the secret names of trees. The longhouse breathes with you. The fire dims. The voices fade. And in the stillness, you carry those stories with you not as facts, but as warmth. Because in winter, stories are as vital as fire. They fill the silence. They stretch time. They remind you that you belong to something bigger than yourself, something old, strange, and still alive. The sky is gray again, though not quite as heavy. No storm today. It's just the kind of cold that seeps quietly into your bones and settles there like a guest who overstays their welcome. You wake slowly, aware of the weight of the blanket, the distant crackle of the fire, and the smell of fermented fish. Ah, today is Preservation Day. The air is pungent. Not bad exactly, just determined. It's not glamorous. In fact, it might be the least glamorous of all Viking winter days, but it's necessary. Food won't last itself, and spring is still many weeks away. She sniffs the fish. I say both, especially this one. So today, you work with what's left, what's drying, what's fermenting, and what's trying not to rot before you get to it. It's not the kind of task that earns you heroic ballads, but you do it anyway, because the alternative is hunger. A third with some kind of mystery mixture that bubbles ominously. It smells like the kind of thing that could keep you healthy. Summon spirits. Carefully. Slowly. You check each scoop for weevils, mold, or uninvited guests. You ask if it's true. He shrugs. Half of it, he says. Maybe. The grain smells sweet and dusty, like autumn trapped in a box. Possibly both. Your cousin pokes it with a stick and pronounces it's still alive. You agree to feed it to the pig later. It's a preservative paste rubbed on wood, tools, and sometimes skin. It smells awful and works beautifully. You notice small items being tucked away for spring. Feathers, colorful stones, bits of fabric, dried flowers tied with twine. You eat a thick slice of dark bread with butter scraped from the last crock, then dip it in broth that's richer than usual. Things that won't feed the body, but might feed the soul. You smear it on the handle of your knife and feel slightly invincible. With jars lined neatly along the wall, each one holding the promise of a meal when nothing fresh grows outside. For the birthing bed, she says. When the goats arrive, you don't ask who's delivering first, the goats or your cousin's wife. These hang from the rafters above the fire pit, slowly cooking for weeks. You turn them gently, wipe them with a cloth, and breathe in the rich, dense scent of survival. You roll out of bed and find a spot near the back wall where racks of fish hang like laundry, stiff and quiet. Your job this morning: scraping dried fish skins and checking for mold. The goat sniffs it, considers, then declines. But fermentation is the backbone of survival. In a world without fridges or imported avocados, it's how you trick food into sticking around. Your hands still carry the scent of dried fish and herbs. Your clothes are dusted in grain and lard. But your heart, oddly enough, feels clean. Even goats have standards. Historians still argue, your aunt says as she slices a dried herring open with practiced hands, whether Viking preservation techniques were based more on science or superstition. She tosses it aside. You move to the fermentation barrels next. There's one with sour, cabbage sharp and vinegary, another with fish paste. It's a strange ritual, this maintenance of strange smells and sour flavors. The bubbling pot releases the scent of meat and smoke. It will become tallow used for cooking, lamps, waterproofing boots, and probably as emergency glue. The Vikings were nothing if not versatile. You ladle out the sour cabbage into smaller pots, layering it with salt and crushed juniper. Nearby, someone is rendering fat. In the afternoon, you help your uncle refill the grain bins. He tells you a story while you work, about a time when the grain went sour and a whole village spent 2 days laughing at nothing before realizing it was the mold. Once the dry stores are organized, you assist in preparing smoked meats. One of the joints is missing a chunk. You glare at the pig, who looks offended. The dog, however, is licking its lips. Later, you help mix a strange but useful concoction: dried herbs, ashes, and melted lard. Preservation isn't just about food, it's about memory. You help your grandmother wrap a bundle of dried lavender and rosemary. Evening comes slowly. The fire burns a little brighter tonight more. Fat in the pot means more heat. Everyone smells faintly of smoke and vinegar, but no one complains. You've made it another day with food still in your stores. With meat hanging, you lie back, full in a quiet, modest way. Because this day, strange as it is, reminds you you're still here. Still tending, still preparing, still feeding the fire. So long as the fire is fed, you know the winter hasn't won. The air outside has shifted. You feel it the moment you wake, not in the temperature, but in the light. There's a softness to it, a slightly longer stretch of gray before it fades back to black. The sun, though still hiding behind clouds thick as wool, is trying to return. Today is a craftatha, kind where the Vikings turn their hands to beauty, because survival alone isn't enough. And with it comes a different kind of day. Someone's lit the oil lamp a little early. The flame flickers golden, casting gentle shadows that feel almost cozy. Not a chore day, not even a preparation day. Thread the color of rust and ash, wound into little knots that mimic runes and ferns. There's no pattern, just memory and rhythm. You offer a compliment. They shrug. Keeps the mind from melting. You sit at the low table, where tools have already been laid out. Bone needles, dyed threads, scraps of leather, bits of horn and antler, shards of old jewelry waiting to be reborn. After 3 failed attempts, you finally shape something acceptable and declare it abstract. Everyone nods wisely. Begin with something simple. A leather pouch. Someone spills blue dye on their tunic and turns it into a decorative patch. Someone else drops a needle, finds a lost earring instead. You realize each object is a thread in the larger tapestry of your home. Every scratch, burn, and bend speaks of someone's hands, someone's moment. Enough to reflect off a polished drinking horn, enough to make the amber beads glow like embers. Little wins. A child is allowed to help, threading them carefully onto sinew. You watch them work and remember your first time trying. You sewed the heel shut, wore them anyway. Each time they drop one, the entire longhouse pauses to listen. One escapes into the straw. It will never be seen again. Cut from hide tanned earlier in the season, stiff, but pliable with enough working. Or maybe the small, pretty pebble you've kept in your pocket since last summer. A pouch for whatever survives the winter. Not because they're finished, but because they've done their work for the day. They've given you purpose, rhythm, control. It reminded you that even in winter, your hands can make something small and good. You mark the holes with an awl, then stitch the seams slowly with gut thread. The leather creaks under your fingers, bending grudgingly. Again. The handle has runes carved along the edge, partly worn away. You can still read the first one. Protection. just enough to remind you that color still exists, even in months where everything else is brown or gray or snow. Because while food keeps the body alive, craft keeps the spirit warm. It's meant to hold herbs, or maybe coins. Fancy, she grins. I say both, especially when the fancy bits confuse the enemy. It's a little crooked, a little stiff, but it holds. It's next to you, someone's embroidering the hem of a tunic. Not just repairs decoration, historians still argue, says your cousin, as she carves a spiral into a bit of antler, whether Viking ornamentation had meaning or was just. Across the room, someone is working on beads glass and amber and old shell fragments, some cracked and uneven. Out. You try your hand at carving a button from bone. Out. It's small, tricky, and very determined not to stay round. There's laughter here today. Out loud, not rowdy, just gentle like wool brushing against wool. The crafts tell stories of their own. A comb carved with wolves' teeth, a belt looped with bronze rings from a melted-down brooch, a wooden spoon with initials no one recognizes. Someone mends a pair of shoes-hide soles, stitched with thick cord. As afternoon rolls in, the light grows bolder. Just a little. You help a neighbor polish a small iron blade. It's ceremonial not for cutting, but for wearing. It's comforting, somehow, to hold these things, these small, unnecessary but necessary things. The children begin braiding wool cords for their dolls. One ties theirs to a stick and declares it a dog. The goat disagrees. You pick up your pouch and add one final stitch, a small loop at the top so you can hang it from your belt. And in it, you tuck a curl of dried lavender. As the light fades again, the crafts are set aside carefully. You tidy the tools, brush the shavings into a pile, and wrap your pouch in a cloth to soften overnight. Then you sit by the hearth, hands dusty, eyes calm. The day didn't bring a feast or a firework, but it gave you beauty. When everything outside is frozen and still, small and good is more than enough. You wake before the fire this time, still dark, the kind of early morning where the longhouse has-in-tea decided whether to keep sleeping or start stirring. You lie there for a while, just listening to the slow breathing of others, the occasional rustle of straw, the soft exhale of the coals still glowing under yesterday's ash. Today, you won't tan hides or carve or spin wool. Today is for doing almost nothing. Because even Viking stuff, snow-tested, frost-cheeked Vikings needed rest. These quiet, bare-boned winter days were built into the rhythm of the year. Soak the bread in broth, the cheese in oil, and eventually they remember how to be food. You eat slowly, savoring the simplicity of chewing without multitasking. Not holidays exactly, but necessary pauses. You don't march every day. You don't fight every moment. Sometimes you simply stop. And today, that's what you do. Every sound is muffled, every branch bowed low under white. You breathe it in the cold, the silence, the clean. You sit by the fire with a bit of bread and cheese, both slightly harder than you remember. But doing it now means one less not to deal with when the rivers thaw. You nod. Either way it worked. You eat by the fire, dipping bread, sharing a pot, not bothering with bowls. It's quiet, content. You listen more than you speak. That feels good. Someone plays a low tune on a bone flute. It's off-key, haunting, and absolutely perfect. But instead of moving, you let it rest there, like a reminder that your body is something you've earned. You step outside just for a moment. The snow is soft, thick as cake frosting, and the world feels wrapped in cotton. Back inside, you find a warm corner and simply sit. When you wake, someone has placed another log on the fire. The room is warmer than before. The children are building a tower of kindling. It immediately collapses. No one cries. They just build it again. The dog sighs in its sleep. Share a story you've told before. Hold a cup until it cools in your hand. Stitch exactly 3 inches of thread into a sleeve, then stop because the thread tangled and you're not in the mood. And again, somehow that's enough to fill the room with purpose. You chat quietly with an elder, nothing important. Just talk of birds, firewood, the strange dreams everyone seems to be having lately. You're watching the quiet beauty of others simply existing. You're relearning that rest, ease and tea wasted it. Es woven into the tapestry of a life that lasts. Someone is mending a cracked mug, gluing it with pine sap. Someone else is combing their hair, strand by strand. Later, you help untangle some fishing nets not for use today, not even next week. Historians still argue, someone remarks, whether Vikings had proper days off or just slowed down when the storm got bad enough. By midday, the longhouse smells of stew again, leftovers turned into something new. In the afternoon, you stretch out on your blanket and feel the ache in your shoulders from days of work. You drift into a nap, not deep, not long, just enough to slip beneath the surface of thought. The sky turns soft gray again, the edges of the day curling inward like parchment over flame. You do nothing important for the rest of the evening. You laugh once. And somehow, this day, this nothing much at all, day feels like one of the most important, because it reminded you, you're not just surviving winter, you're living it. You're listening to the slow rhythm of your own mind. And tomorrow, the sun may rise just a little earlier. Tomorrow, you'll salt fish, or mend nets, or carve a dragon into a comb. But tonight, you exhale.
Ouch.
And let the stillness wrap around you like wool. So here you are now. The fire has burned low. The voices have faded, the longhouse sleeps, and so do most of its worries. But you've made it through another Viking winter's day, not with glory or conquest, but with simple tasks, quiet rhythms, and small sturdy joys. Your breath has mingled with the fire's smoke and the house's old creaking bones. Your hands have shaped tools and held warmth. Your feet have paced straw-covered floors. And now it's time to rest. Inside, you are wrapped in stories, in wool, in the steady comfort of a roof that holds. Let the snow fall outside. Let it blanket the world in silence. There is nothing more to do today. No raids to plan, no boats to launch, no gods to impress. Just breathe. Let the last glow of the coals flicker behind your eyes. Let your limbs grow heavy. Your thoughts loosen like threads from a spindle. Drift. You've worked. You've laughed. You've carved something into this day. If it was only your own calm place in it. Sleep now, Viking. Tomorrow will wait. And before you drift all the way into sleep, just a quiet thank you from me to you for sharing this moment, for letting your mind wander through the soft folds of ancient history. If this story helped you relax, unwind, or simply forget the day for a little while, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button, not out of habit only, if it truly brought you peace. Wishing you the gentlest dreams. And I'll see you again soon, right here. Good night.